Hi, this is Jeff Kober, and we welcome you to Disney Insights. A few weeks ago, our family found a really good 5-day, 4-night deal, and ultimately a remarkably great experience on the original Disney Magic. It's a trip where we left from Port Canaveral, visited Nassau and the new Disney Lookout Cay at Lighthouse Point, and then disembarked after a day at sea in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Our experience gave us great insights to new experiences, as well as provided us a chance to revisit the original Disney Cruise Line ship. While we are saving Lookout Cay for another podcast, there is a lot to share about this trip, and it will give you some insights, not only about this itinerary, but about booking late, and about what it's like to come back to the original Disney Magic. Oh, and we're dealing with a grown autistic son, so yeah, it's kind of crazy. And that said, climb aboard as we head on a Disney Magic Voyage with San Juan, Puerto Rico. This podcast is produced by myself and Performance Journeys, which offers training, development, and consultant support to organizations big and small, and to entrepreneurs new and established. With a wide variety of resources and long-time in-the-trench experience, we offer workshops, online learning, coaching, and so much more to organizations that want to build their teams, raise organizational excellence, improve leadership, and create customer loyalty. So, hey, check us out over at performancejourneys.com. And please support us not only by subscribing to this podcast, but if you get a chance, go to iTunes and offer up a rating, review, or referral to others. Be sure to check out our website, DisneyInsights.com, where we offer key points, photos, videos, links, and so much more. And note that our Disney Insights YouTube page also carries our podcast now, plus so many hundreds of Disney videos, including a version or a kind of tribute to the Disney Magic that you want to check out. So, hey, please subscribe to our Disney Insights YouTube page, as it will be more a part of our social media strategy moving forward. Well, let's talk a little bit about, we were long overdue for a Disney cruise vacation, and we had eyed this trip for some time and really liked it as something kind of different, because it allowed us to not only see Lighthouse Cay, but Puerto Rico for the first time. We had also only been on the Magic once, and that was back in 2016. So we were ready to re-explore that as well. Then we got really excited about the possibility that when Disney was posting rates at 40% off. But the problem is, we were still uncertain of our schedule and situation. The discount went away by the time we pulled the lever, but we still booked at 30% off. We should stop and say that it's why I've decided not to pay for the 10% off at the end of the cruise, because we typically don't do a cruise that isn't discounted. And when you do take a discount, my understanding is that 10% discount goes away. And fortunately, my wife's new schedule affords us more flexibility when we go, which we didn't have earlier when she was on a school schedule teaching. I mention all this because with all the really cool hype about the new Disney Destiny, and hey, doesn't it seem really cool? It also is nearly 2 times more expensive to do the same length trip on it or on the Disney Treasure right now. And since many families are looking for a good value on a Disney ship when they are the most expensive of all cruise lines, we think it's worth considering this alternative, which for us gave us a chance to see Disney's newest island and a new port adventure with Puerto Rico. We originally booked separated interior rooms 10 days out. Only 10 days out, actually. Then we saw a good deal for booking separate ocean view rooms, because those were interior rooms, about 48 hours prior. So we took advantage of that. And then when we got to the cruise ship, we decided to get in line to see if we could somehow combine the 2 adjoining rooms, which we've done in the past, and it worked to our advantage successfully without us having to pay any additional amount. We were able to find two rooms next to each other, but not adjoining. And actually, we did pay a little bit more for it. In arriving, we ended up with a later arrival time because, hey, we were only booking out 10 minutes. So people had already booked their time for arrival. Because our son-in-law was dropping us off, we got there about an hour before that stated time. And honestly, there was no real problem. In truth, it was difficult to get the arrival time right because we were disembarking in a different city. So we didn't have the flexibility of driving our own car and parking there, since we would be arriving back home by way of MCO. To have arrived earlier might have been a problem if the ship had been more booked than it was. I don't know the numbers on board, but it didn't seem as booked, which probably prompted their very discounted offers. When we got out, we were given luggage tags to write in our name, as we booked so late luggage tags didn't have a chance to arrive. Having left the suitcases with the porter, they did put us in a sort of rank queue before going through security, but that didn't last a minute before we were ushered inside when we went to security and then up to the waiting area. Our number for boarding was 19. We were doing 6 at that time. We waited in line to change our room, which took the better part of about 40 minutes. The advantage of that is that we were given a walk-on time of 16 in exchange. That number was called immediately, and then, hey, we were right on board. It was great to get right on board because once our number was called, we were able to just go right on to lunch, and we were able to go directly to our rooms as well, as they were available by that time. But the luggage, that luggage was not there. We ended up going down to the second floor and finding them there where our original interior rooms were, and then bringing them back up to our rooms. That was lucky, largely lucky for us, but there was a hassle factor in that. On the other side, our rooms were on the 6th floor and were forward on the ship. Too often we're in the aft, and it seems a little bit more bumpy back there. There were some moments we felt the ship moving, but not in our rooms. They seemed to be great in terms of that regard. Let's just say that the takeaway in all of this, that while there is flexibility in booking late, there is also a price to it in terms of when you get to board the ship, the kind of rooms that would be available to you, and the hassle of lining up everything, such as your luggage. By the way, in all of this, Leah Zanola couldn't have been more helpful in getting us booked immediately and trying to accommodate us right up to the moment we left to go on the ship. So again, this is why we talk about Zanola Travel, is because, hey, there is somebody helping you do some of the heavy lifting in this, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. Yeah, they are able to get a percentage from Disney, but that percentage wouldn't go to you if you'd done it on your own. You would have just been left to do it all your own. So again, highly recommend Zanola Travel for your, whether it's a cruise or any kind of trip. Now, for the joy of being on a ship. Typically, upon boarding, we like to go up to cabanas for our first meal. I really see that as a moment, as well as my afternoon swim, as the chance to truly feel like we are now on vacation. However, our autistic son was very excited to see the Tangled show. I didn't know that he had any clue that there was also a Tangled restaurant. But the moment we boarded, he headed straight down the hallway to that restaurant like he knew the place forward or backward. Again, we hadn't been on there since 2016 when we took the ship from Miami and experienced Key West. But that restaurant was Carioca's at that time and was Parrot Key prior when the first ship was first built. The restaurant was fairly full when we arrived, and lunch was okay. Actually, the empanadas served was really good, and I'm not a big fan of empanadas, but that was the best one I'd ever had. You should not experience this restaurant on day one for lunch. You should experience it at night when the lighting is amazing and the music and the entertainment complements the setting. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but during the day, it doesn't impress with all the light filtering through the window and I just wouldn't make that my first choice. Now, our dining was accommodated to an earlier time in the evening because our room was forward on the ship. When we dropped to deck 4 to go to dinner, he could see that others were lining up for Tangled the musical. This was the show he wanted to see. And while we told him he would be able to see it after dinner at Artist Palette, but he would not be detoured. Instead, he insisted on seeing that showing of Tangled. So after our best efforts to try to convince him otherwise, I finally invited my wife and daughter to just go to dinner without me, and I would accompany him to see the first showing. The great news about this is that the Tangled show did not disappoint. It was a great show on many levels. In some ways, I found it more entertaining than the Frozen or Beauty and the Beast shows. Rapunzel was strong. Mother Gothel was even better. There were lots of singing parts for the King and Queen. It offered more of an ensemble type show where everyone got a little opportunity to share. Our son likes to sit on the front row, but on the far right. The far, far, far right. It is not a good seat. By the way, he does this at Mickey's Filler Magic. He'll do that at Hall of Presidents. He'll do that in every single theatrical showing. Finding Nemo the musical. I think it's that he's kind of curious about what happens in the wings of a theater stage, and so he kind of likes to see that. But I gotta tell you, it's not a good seat. But we were near the deaf interpreters, and their performance was almost as enjoyable as the show. The downside in all this is that I missed Artist Palette. Let me be clear, I love this concept. But I'm kind of over the concept of Crush. I like Crush in the parks, but I don't need him on the ship, nor is it even close to being entertaining. I do like the interactive drawings that I believe happen on the Dream. This version on the Magic is quintessential Disney, and I missed enjoying it with my family. Still, in an effort to get some food, I went to the second sitting, explained my situation, and was seated at table 2, which was a single table for 2. The food was great, and the opportunity to see the characters like Robin Hood come to life as they were drawn on the screen reminded me of my own childhood, where I spent endless hours learning to sketch Disney characters. Of course, I miss getting to know my servers. That wouldn't happen until the second evening. I did happen to meet my head server, who quickly just asked if I was all right. And then he made it over to the family at table 1, which he seemed to know from a prior sailing. He engaged with them beautifully. I was interested in how he would engage with us as a family on the following evenings. Unfortunately, he was disappointing, really stopping long enough to give the typical spiel about what we should be aware of the day ahead. I left as soon as I was done with dinner and rejoined my family to see the rest of the second showing of Tangled. That didn't disappoint, but we never got another opportunity to return to Artist Palette that entire trip. Well, that was day 1. On day 2, we are in Nassau. Now, once everyone was up, I took on a quick breakfast at Cabanas and then a swim at the pool where I was the only one. I love this pool on the Magic and Wonder as it's kind of square in size, but with plenty of shallow wet areas on the sides to sit and splash. Moreover, it afforded me an opportunity to swim laps. Now, I usually swim in a 25-yard pool, and that's not it there on the ship. But from my best estimates, this seems to be half that, about 12 yards. And it works. I got in a good mile that morning. Then I rejoined family members for a second breakfast at Cabanas. Breakfast at Cabanas beats any meal on the ship anywhere. I love breakfast, and I love it at Cabanas. Add churro Mickey waffles, and we've gone to heaven. Lunch, on the other hand, after you've been on the ship so many times, seems a little, Repeated visits to Nassau also makes you less interested in getting off the ship. I only took photos and video of the immediate port area in Nassau, the new port area, as I wanted to capture the difference in the essence of this more polished tourist area to what we might experience at Lighthouse Point the next day. Lighthouse Point isn't just about being a beach getaway, which it does very well, but it is really about celebrating Bahamian culture. I wanted to get a sense of this. The first time I went last year to this port, it had barely opened, wasn't even quite finished, and it felt kind of empty. Nothing could have been more different on this second visit. Among all the ships in port, at least 4 were there. Guests were out and about grabbing food and drink, doing shopping, getting hair braided, everything. It was really festive and more impressive than the first time I visited. There's also a Junkanoo museum. I only got a glimpse, but sense that if you really want to know more about the culture, you could find something here. I also spent 30 minutes heading down some streets looking for a couple of items before returning to the ship. We did our share of checking things out on the ship, but probably joined less activities than we had in the past. On our Alaska cruise on the Wonder, I took to writing the first half of A Century of Disney Insights 100, the Walt and Roy Disney years. Because that was a long trip, I was able to enjoy getting some writing done. And it was just my wife and I on that particular trip. This time, I felt more to focus on my family. Honestly, our son was a little overwhelmed by it all, as excited as he was to do the trip, but ended up sleeping off several hours each afternoon. I spent some time watching him and taking in something of a nap as well. I also, in the down moments, took up to reading After Disney, Toil, Trouble, and Transformation of America's Favorite Media Company. The cover of this book shows Ron Miller, son-in-law to Walt Disney, and Roy E. Disney, son to Roy O. Disney, who were pivotal in that span of years between Walt and Roy and Michael Eisner. And those sections covering the two and the dynamics between the two were pretty fascinating. But they were not the thread throughout the book. Rather, it was animation, or more particularly, the delayed and prolonged effort of bringing the Black Cauldron to life. It was interesting, but I thought the book largely missed the second big influence of that time period, and that was the development of Epcot, a park that was so overspent in construction and so underattended after its first year that it commanded the need for replacing leadership. Still, the book was a good read for a cruise like this. While the lunch at Rapunzel's royal table was only okay, as I mentioned on that first day, it was fantastic on every level when we came for dinner that evening. Everything about that experience worked. First of all, it was gloriously lit with lanterns and a really colorful medieval-style backdrop. The table settings were beautiful with elegant tableware to include high-end touches on the china. And then there was the entertainment. It wasn't always easy to hear what was being said, but it was really most festival in atmosphere. And everyone was just busy having a really good time. The characters went from table to table and even met people while we were lined up to enter the restaurant. Our son loved talking to Rapunzel. And then at the end, they had everyone joining a procession around the room, with our children joining in. I finally met our servers, and our primary server was one of the best I've ever had. I love this experience. I love the experience with Tiana's on board the Wonder, but I think this is even better, especially for families. While my daughter watched our son, my wife and I got away to see Twice Charmed Cinderella show aboard the ship. We're glad to get away. The show is the lesser probably of all shows that I've seen across the Disney fleet, but I have seen Aladdin one too many times, as well as the Golden Mickeys, not only on 2 different ships, but in Hong Kong. And so I was really glad to see something I didn't recall seeing on the Disney Magic back in 2016. I should also note that the same woman who plays Lady Tremaine in Twice Charmed is the same who played Mother Gothel the night before. Really great performances. We should mention it was also Halloween. and my two adult autistic children welcomed that. While we didn't go to any of the Halloween tree readings in the evening, we did do trick or treat. They give you a bag, and you get to go to 5 or 6 different locations on 2 of the levels, all of which you can turn around and revisit again and again. We left with several filled bags of candy in what was a very well orchestrated giveaway. It was a lot of fun. Lots of folks dressed in costumes. We weren't really that group, but it was fun to see everybody else's costume and see the enjoyment of everybody checking out Trick or Treat. That brings us to day 3, Disney Lookout Cay at Lighthouse Point. As I mentioned earlier, Disney Lookout Cay at Lighthouse Point is a whole podcast in and of itself and will be the focus early next Thanksgiving week. So be sure to check it out. And let me tell you, it surpassed my expectations. I was quite pleasantly surprised by what I found. But I wanted to do, with this gap here in days, to just rather than focus on Lighthouse Point, to consider the Disney Magic itself. It was the first ship, followed not long after by the Disney Wonder. And they were the only 2 ships for the better part of another dozen years before the dream and the fantasy became a reality. Now we have some 13 ships potentially on the horizon. But it all began with the magic. To study the Disney Magic is to realize what worked and what really didn't quite work. They really were pioneers in looking at this and really had a lot of courage to make this huge investment, not just in ships, but in a port, in an island, a getaway island, and in the entire infrastructure to make this thing a reality. Of course, with all of that amazing effort, there are still some things that don't work. There are things that do work. The style of the ship, for instance, that works. The color and look and feel of the ship, that works. The idea that there are 3 dining destinations with servers joining you in each location, that works. An array of children's programming and the complete removal of casinos and smoking, that works. In fact, people were wondering about the new ship in Singapore. Oh, they're going to have a casino. You can't do that audience without casinos. But they were saying the same things when Disney started in the beginning. It all works. Plus, there's great Disney-style entertainment. There's characters. And, lo and behold, there are even fireworks, which aren't even done anywhere in any other cruise line. All that said, there are a few things that, after they put it together, didn't really quite work. And there are things that matter. First, the size matters. Of course, it's a smaller ship. You know that when you sign on to board the ship, and you know it when you get on the ship. There is a difference in the atrium compared to the other ships. And it doesn't help that the Wish was next door and it looked much, much bigger when we were boarding this ship. And at that time, when they were premiering the Disney Magic, the Wonder was already well underway. And so they weren't able to affect big things like the size. It's why the Dream and Fantasy and everything else that has followed has been much bigger. Oh, and elevators. Let me tell you, tight elevators in this ship. But they learned from all that and made it different moving forward. The second is design and flow matters. With the original ship here at the Magic, there are some dead ends. They certainly ended up on our floor. Note that the newest ships are also, the Wish, when it came out, was criticized for having some dead ends. Some places were not dead end in flow, but they were dead in terms of utilization of any art or design. There are places you go and they're just simply bare walls on the Magic, and they seem out of place. It almost feels like you're in an awkward and weird place. What I really usually love about Disney cruise ships is there's seldom a moment where wherever you are, whether you're up on the pool deck, whether you are in a theater, whether you are in a restaurant, whether you are in going down a hallway to your room, there's seldom a moment where you're not reminded you are in a Disney experience. Which brings me to the third thing: Disney matters. In the effort to give, quote, what they called birth to a modern classic when they built the Disney Magic, there are a number of graphic art treatments that were done by New Jersey artist Steve Guanaccia. They were intended to align with the classic Art Deco design of the ship, but they don't speak Disney. You could argue that maybe they are interesting and well done images, even perhaps. I don't particularly care for the style, nor do I think that they are the best in terms of aligning with Art Deco. I would say that they are whimsical in their design. I would definitely give them credit for being that. But they just aren't very Disney at all. In one hallway that we went down, they would have about 7 images that were all lined up on a wall. And they actually tried to communicate a little bit about what the Disney Magic was all about. And they were kind of interesting. For instance, the ship is 964 feet, and it was put vertically in a sign that says the Eiffel Tower is 986 feet. So it's almost the length of the Eiffel Tower was the message there. And another, you see kind of this balance, and you see that the anchor weighs 28,200 pounds, and that is actually comparative to having 3 elephants. And another one, you see that the 5,000 eggs consumed every morning at breakfast, 1,956 are scrambled, 552 are served sunny side up, 480 are eaten soft boiled, and 984 are made into omelets. And 976 of those are made into other egg style dishes. So there are through 5,390 pillows on board. They go through 20,000 gallons of paint to just paint the ship. All of these kinds of little things. And they're all done in this style that Stephen Guarnaccia had done. And they are whimsical, and one could make a case maybe that they are somewhat Art Deco in their motif, but they're not Disney, and they don't speak Disney. There are some nautical-based Disney sketches and illustrations in the stairwells, the narrow stairwells, I would say, another thing they learned. But their images are framed smaller, and compared to later ships, even the Wonder, there just is not enough of them. There's just not enough Disney. I love the Disney ships because they evoke Disney in classic ways at nearly every turn. But that is not so defined on Disney Magic. Certainly, with the addition of Rapunzel's royal table, it makes a big difference. They had wonderful oil paintings and early sketches of what Rapunzel or Tangled might look like. And they are all along the hallway leading to that restaurant. They make a big difference, but that's a much later ad. In another location, there is Soul Cat Lounge. Loosely based on Soul, the film that came out a few years ago, but it doesn't have much Disney soul within it. In another example, one of the original things they put in as an elegant example of design of that kind of era of ship, you imagine the era of the Titanic and so forth, they have framed images of costumes that were designed for the happiest millionaire. Now, one might say this is a real deep cut to have these randomly put there. And frankly, it is a deep cut. Most don't even know the film. But its appearance is random and perhaps only selected because it represented maybe the same era as classic ships. Maybe? Again, you kind of miss the Disney feel being really the way it is on the later ships. Returning to the events of day 3, we came back to the ship mid-afternoon and spent time at the pool relaxing. It was pirate night, and our family was so winded that we took it fairly casual that evening. Dinner was again at Rapunzel's royal table, and honestly, maybe the menu is getting better, or maybe I'm just getting better at guessing the menu. But the dinner was delicious, which for many people just don't like dinner on pirate night and often try to book Palo or something else during that time. But we had a good time as a family at the table. I later went and captured a little of the dance party upstairs, but ended up seeing the fireworks from the window of our room. Day 4 was at sea, though much of this day was a wet day at sea, that still didn't stop my swimming the 12.5-foot pool. I got a good mile in that morning while the water sort of rocked from side to side, but there weren't very many interested in getting into the water at that time. Somewhere after lunch, our son had kind of a meltdown. I think he was done with vacation. And he kind of had a meltdown on the way back to his room. For a kid with a big heart, but also a big-sized body, he can sometimes go from Bruce Banner to Incredible Hulk in no time flat. This was one of those experiences, and my wife was alone with him to handle it. These are anxious moments, not just trying to address our son's frustrations, but also addressing the awkward, embarrassing situation it puts other passengers in. It got resolved quickly, but it was a moment when we realized that maybe we had taken on too much with our autistic children. And yet we still had 2 more days to go before getting home. After some rest, we went to dinner. Lumiere's was the dining location on the last evening. It was also where we had breakfast on the disembarkation day. This restaurant was the first Disney cruise ship location to offer the best fine dining possible. The dinner itself was wonderful, and despite learning that our server was heading to Indonesia early the next morning, we were glad to be together. And somehow my birthday, which was kind of the excuse for this cruise, my birthday got celebrated at the end of the dinner. Not something I really seek after, but it was nice, and I felt that this was one of our better moments with our head server. That said, while Lumiere's restaurant is, quote, one of elegant simplicity, end of quote, its design seems bare compared to the elegance of later ships. There is a grand mural from the film on one end, but it's just a painted mural. By the time they got to Wonder, it was a tiled mural, and on other ships, it's simply grander and more impressive. Here, the service stations are designed and placed in a way that it feels like this is part ballroom, part cubicle office. And yet, this is what they had to begin with, and they somehow learned that it was important enough that each successor ship should be a little bit more elegant than the one before. And really, when you see how this thing has just continued evolving, they really have. But I think also, I hearken back to the reality. These people, Eisner and all, they were really proud of their work creating the Disney Magic. And while it isn't as good as the ones we have today, it really is one of the biggest milestones in Disney's history to go into this kind of business and do this. And I heard a number the other day that said over 1 million people this year will board Disney cruise ships in just Florida alone. There's a lot going on in the Disney Cruise Line, but it all really did begin with this little ship. Prior to the last show, I happened, while walking around doing photos and videos around the ship, to see an act called Songs in the Ever After at Fathom's Lounge. I'm sorry, but after much research, I can't be sure of the name of the actress or singer, but it was the same individual who portrayed Lady Tremaine and Mother Gothel in earlier shows. They are really great performers. And then there are Broadway caliber performers. I could see it in the earlier shows, but it really played out when she did her musical act on the last night in the lounge. I've seen other acts like this on other ships, and I can't emphasize enough how amazing these performers are. The finale of the day was Disney Dreams, an Enchanted classic. It is on both the Magic and Wonder with a little slight variation. I like it a little better than Disney's Believe, which is found on the Dream and Fantasy. But I like them all. It's simply a thread for having any number of Disney musical numbers paraded in front of you. And a musical show like these is, at its very core, very Disney. On day 5, we disembarked and headed to San Juan, Puerto Rico. We got into Puerto Rico and had breakfast, but unfortunately without our server, Sami, who had already was heading off the ship to catch a flight back to Indonesia. We missed him, and he was really great. Disembarking in Puerto Rico went very quickly. They called our number as we were finishing breakfast, and from the moment we left Lumiere's until we were in a taxi, it was not more than 20 minutes. Everything went quickly and smoothly during disembarkation. Smooth may not have been the way my wife and daughter would have described transportation in Puerto Rico. My own international travels make me a little more immune to the traffic craziness and what others might consider crazy driving. There are 2 ways that I have found to do hotels in the San Juan area. One would be near the port, which would be more proximate to Old San Juan and the forts. Our choice was near the airport, which put us close to a solid beach in a fairly upscale area. We booked a Marriott room for $300 a night, and the first thing I did when I had access to phone service, which works as any domestic service in the U.S. and Puerto Rico, was to call Marriott and arrange for an early check-in. This they not only did, but upgraded us to a suite, which we checked into at 8:30 that morning. Another family checking in at the same time ended up waiting much longer in the afternoon. This was a Residence Inn, and it was probably the nicest Residence Inn I've ever stayed in with Marriott. Not only was the room fully outfitted as a kitchen, but there was a full-size 25-foot swimming pool with lanes down it, and a big children's swimming pool complex as well, plus restaurants and a major store nearby. I highly recommend this hotel. However, our kids were pretty overwhelmed by the events of everything on our ship, and they just fell asleep in the room. And so my wife and I took a small walk to the beach. Lovely, but we'd already had our share of swimming that week. We then went and did some grocery shopping done to get us through the next couple of days. At lunch, we took it even easier by going to Chili's across the street. There were better restaurants all around, focusing on cuisine of this island country, but for our son, it was basic and easy. In other words, fries and chicken tenders, and we didn't want to rock the boat any more than we had to. As we walked through San Juan at the end of the day, we heard the familiar "When You Wish Upon a Star" come from the horns of the Disney Magic as she took off late that afternoon. In the last operating hours of the day, we got to see Castillo San Felipe del Morro. It was spectacular. It, along with San Cristobal Castle, really provides not only the architectural pinnings of the exterior of Pirates of the Caribbean and Magic Kingdom, but it, as well as Old San Juan, provides some of the architectural basis for the interior of the attraction. None of it disappointed me. I could have wandered there for hours, but we had no clear plan as we moved down the hilly streets of Old San Juan, and my children were getting hungry. We settled on a sandwich shop, which had fries and chicken nuggets next door at Wendy's, and got something to eat. I was hoping to do more, but my kids had had enough. Enough that we not only got an Uber and headed back to our hotel, but also had a difficult conversation about what each of us can or can't handle on a trip. Not the conversation you really want to have at the end of a really big trip, but a necessary one because we really wanted to do something more with our children travel-wise in the future. It was a big lesson and opportunity for me to listen. The next day, we got to the airport early and were handled extremely well, perhaps better than any other TSA group I've encountered. Spirit, Southwest, JetBlue, and Frontier, go figure, Frontier, had direct flights to Orlando. but were long-timers on Delta and had points for 2 free tickets going back home. Only going back home on Delta means flying through Atlanta. That's almost the distance of going from Orlando to Salt Lake as it is from going from San Juan to Atlanta. And despite explaining this to our son, he is wiped out when we realized we weren't yet home and had a tearful final meltdown in Terminal E at Atlanta. Not great, but we did eventually get home. I learned that some 250 passengers stayed with the ship and ultimately went on a southern tour of the Caribbean to include Willemstad, Curacao, Aruba, Antigua, and St. Martin. That is a 7-night experience. But combined with the 4-night experience makes it a pretty big vacation experience. Also moving backwards, there's also a 4-night leaving Puerto Rico and seeing both Disney islands on the way back to Port Canaveral. If I were to do the trip again, I would have done that. I would have started in Puerto Rico, given ourselves a little bit more time there, and then boarded the ship to head home. And with that offer of both Disney islands, that's a great offer, as well as the price they provide. Still, with the discount we had, we were really glad we got a chance to do what we did. In summary, we got a great value off of this experience. Yes, it was last minute, but it really was a great discount. Could have even been better if we had acted sooner, and that discount made it worth it for us. Seeing Puerto Rico for the first time as a disembarkation point was a real wow for me and made the experience so much more than a typical Nassau-style trip. And Disney Lookout Cay at Lighthouse Point, that was a winner. We'll talk about that in our next podcast, which we'll have very early next week, and we'll do a comparison with Castaway Cay. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And remember, if you're going to do this, whether it's a Disney theme park vacation, a cruise, Venture by Disney, reach out to David and Leah at Zenola Travel. Their link is in our show notes and at DisneyInsights.com. Oh, and by the way, that book I wrote back on the Alaska trip, it's available on Amazon, as well as The Wonderful World of Customer Service at Disney and Disney Leadership and Use. So the links are again in the show notes, but you can go directly to Amazon, type in the names of those books, and they are fantastic gift givers at this holiday season. For the person in your life who really loves Disney and wishes maybe there was a little more of it in their own world back home. Well, hey, thanks for joining us for this podcast. Know that is in the title of Performance Journeys. It's as much about the journey as it is about performance. Find the second star to the right and keep going straight on till you reach it. Follow the compass of your heart and know that with a smile and a song, a little faith, effort, and pixie dust, your dreams can come true. After all, if we can dream it, we can do it. Until next time, bright suns, we'll see you real soon.